questions. I appreciate it, and I also learned from the questions you asked as well. So, in no particular order, so here's one. Has Congress ever discussed providing all Americans with the same health care program as Congress receives? If not, will you sponsor such legislation? So I am on Obamacare because under current law, if you're a member of Congress and you want health care, you get Obamacare. So I don't know where this misimpression came in, that somehow we have our own super special healthcare system for members of Congress. No, it's not only am I on Obamacare, I have to actually buy off the Washington, D.C. exchange. So I particularly sort of, get a short end of the stick because that D.C. exchange just isn't as good as the California one. But those are the facts. So California members of Congress, and actually any member of Congress, if they want health care and they don't get it through their spouse, they're on Obamacare and they have to get off the D.C. exchange. So that's where we are. But let's talk about the broader question on health care in general. It is a huge problem when you try to not implement the law as directed. So the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. And the Trump administration, unfortunately, has been trying to sabotage it. And they've been trying to cut funding to let people know they can sign up for it. They've been trying to reduce all sorts of things that would get more people into the systems. What that means is that ends up increasing healthcare costs on everyone who has it. And so you're going to see now increases in healthcare premiums. And because in the Tax Act that the Republicans passed, they removed the mandate, a lot of otherwise healthy people now will no longer be in these exchanges, which then makes the risk pools even riskier, thereby driving up healthcare costs even more. And because the Republicans did that, you can bet that lots of folks will point out, hey, you messed up Obamacare and my healthcare premiums are increasing. So hopefully we can work together to try to bring down costs, but it's very hard when you have one party that's continually trying to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. So my prediction is people's healthcare premiums will increase, and it's because of actions that Donald Trump and Republicans are taking. Something else you should understand, if you're not on one of these exchanges, if you get your healthcare through your employer, which is the majority of Americans, you should understand what the Affordable Care Act does for you. So before the Affordable Care Act, even if you were on employer-based health care, insurance companies could come in and set caps on how much they would pay you. So let's say you came down with a particularly bad case of cancer and you needed a bunch of operations and chemo treatments. It was going to be a long time in terms of how you would get these treatments, and you had to go to the hospital and so on. The insurance company, even under employer-based healthcare, could say, you hit your coverage caps, we're not paying anymore. In which case you have two choices. You could go bankrupt, or you could stop receiving treatment and die quicker.
Why?
Under Affordable Care Act, it says, no, insurance companies, you can't do that. You cannot put in annual coverage caps. You cannot put in lifetime coverage caps.
So they just kick people off when people die.
And thank goodness the Republicans couldn't repeal that.
They will.
Another thing the Affordable Care Act did is it said to folks, hey, if actually you're, let's say 21, 22, 23, you don't have a job, you can go on your parents' employer-based health care coverage.
Sure.
So for a lot of millennials and younger folks, this was a huge benefit. Again, especially if you had diabetes, cancer, or one of these pre-existing conditions. Third thing that Affordable Care Act says is you cannot discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. All the proposals that Republicans had to try to repeal it would have allowed discrimination against people with pre-existing conditions. And you'll see these arguments where the Republicans would say, well, we've created a separate risk pool to help people with pre-existing conditions. Well, so let's think about that. Why would they do that? Why would you put everyone with pre-existing conditions and put them into a different risk pool? to jack up those costs on those people and make them pay so much more that eventually they couldn't get health coverage. But because the Republicans at least failed in that respect to repeal the Affordable Care Act, we still have all those protections. So that's my answer on that healthcare issue. Okay, another question is, 2016 was the second time in 16 years that the popular vote did not determine the presidency.
It shouldn't.
Do you support the effort to revisit the way the Electoral College determines the presidency so that we move to a popular vote? If so, can you talk about what it is being done in this regard? So that's a great question.
No, it isn't.
I do support going to a popular vote, more because to me that resembles democracy more. I understand we're a republic, but I also like democracy.
We are a republic.
And it's how we pretty much elect everybody else, right? I don't have a mini electoral college in my congressional district.
Maybe you should.
I'm elected on the popular vote.
Maybe you should.
Now, if you project into the future, though, I get why Democrats are upset because we have won the popular vote twice and we've lost the presidency.
Good.
But if you project into the future, just based on demographics, Texas is going to turn blue. Once that happens, it's just game over in the Electoral College.
No, it isn't.
For Republicans. Florida is going to turn blue. And so what you're going to see, maybe not in 4 years, but 8, 12 years, you will see Democrats having a massive advantage in the Electoral College because we will win these big states. That also leads to sort of another point I have, which is not only have Democrats won the popular vote in presidential elections, we've won them in midterms. We basically win them in every election. We win the popular vote. The only reason the Republicans control the House of Representatives is because gerrymandering. There's been a number of court cases now in 7 states that have struck down these gerrymandered districts. And in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago was particularly significant because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court made the decision and they wrote a very smart ruling where they said, we base our entire decision on the state constitution, which means it's not even, I'm not even sure a federal court could intervene in that. And they directed that the lines be redrawn before this November's elections. And if you talk to redistricting experts, we're talking about a pickup of 1 or 4 seats, essentially, for the Democrats. But what this means over time, as these courts are striking down these gerrymandered maps, is you can have less gerrymandering, which means that the popular vote then matters more in those districts. And once these court cases essentially eventually get implemented, these gerrymandered districts go away, it'll be very hard for the Republican Party to ever regain control again unless they expand their base. Because what happens, right, is it'll mean when the Democrats win the popular vote, it also means we win the congressional districts. So that's where we are, and I typically tend to support popular vote. Okay, I wonder what you have any thought on the impact of the top 2 primary system. So California has a unique system, actually it's actually not unique, Washington State has it as well in some other jurisdictions, but many don't. So California's system basically says in the primary, the top 2 vote getters advance, which means you could have 2 Republicans advancing to general election, or you have 2 Democrats. And if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, that may be either good for you or bad for you. My view is we should probably have a Republican and a Democrat in the general. To me, it makes more sense. But it does create interesting problems. And there's a potential of that happening. First of all, there's a potential of that happening every time we have elections in California. But particularly this year, because if you just look at folks who are running, there are lots of candidates running on the Democratic side. There's a lot of energy. And if there's less Republicans running, then it becomes a math issue. So let's say there's only 3 Republicans or even 2 running in a district, and then you've got 8 Democrats. It could be the Democrats split up the votes somewhat evenly, and then the top 3 Republicans get the majority of the Republican vote, and then they will advance. Flip side could happen. You could have the reverse, where you've got a bunch of Republicans running, few Democrats and the 2 Democrats advance. So it's an issue. It is a problem depending on your particular viewpoint of whether you're a Democrat or Republican and which races you care about. But it's also the law. It's just something we have to deal with, and it's not going to be changed, and it's something that I think campaigns have to take into account, but that's how we run elections in California. Okay. The release of the Nunez memo is a story told from one point of view. What can Democrats do to ensure that another viewpoint is told? So yes, the Nunez memo reads like an opinion piece in Breitbart. When it comes out tomorrow, you're going to read it and you go, okay, this is like reading an op-ed. But it's going to create tremendous pressure for the opposing viewpoint to come out. And so I hope the Republicans will vote to release the Democratic memo. When you talk to some of the Republicans, they make it seem like it was a timing issue. So the Nunez memo, what they did is basically the Nunez memo, just so you know, it's a memo from Nunez's staff to himself. Okay, so that's what memo is. Sort of silly. And then they write this thing, and then they go, okay, we gotta release this memo, And so then they vote to release it to the members of the House of Representatives. So folks can go look at it. And then after that, they released it to the public. So the Democrats, after Nunez did this memo, were like, okay, this is really silly, but we need to respond to it. So Democrats write this memo, and procedurally, the Republicans said, look, we're gonna release it to the House of Representatives, which they did last week. There were motions to also release it to the public, and they suggested that, no, we need to do it to the House of Representatives first, let people read it here for a week, and then we'll vote to release it to the public. So I'm gonna take them at their word for it, that it was just a timing issue, and that next week, they'll release it to the public. So we'll see if that happens. If that doesn't happen, I think it's probably, it's not as good, but it does tremendously undercut their argument, right? If they're not going to release the Democratic memo, then we just spend all day going, okay, what are you hiding? What are you so scared of? Why would you release this? I think at some level, the Democrats win either way. And just looking at the various statements that Republicans are making about full transparency, that's why we want to release the Nunez memo, we'll just use those words exactly as the Republicans have said, and okay, you want full transparency, you need to release the Democratic one.
Sure.
So my sense is it'll come out. Reporters also very good, right, at getting to the truth. I think eventually you're going to see articles come out about the underlying facts regardless of what happens. So that's my sense. Do you think Christopher Wray, he's the FBI director, should resign if the White House releases the Nunez memo? So there's an article on CNN suggesting that he was thinking about doing that. I don't know. I think it's up to him if he wants to. But I do want you all to understand what the leadership is of the special counsel investigation. There are 3 leaders of the special counsel investigation. There is Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. He is a Republican, appointed twice by Republican presidents. He supervises Robert Mueller, who is a Republican, previously appointed by a Republican president and then later by a Democratic president. Robert Mueller is also a war hero, received the Bronze Star with Valor in Vietnam. He is widely respected on both sides of the aisle. Third person who's a leader of the investigation is FBI Director Christopher Wray, a Republican appointed by a Republican president. And oh, by the way, Christopher Wray has given over $39,000 in political contributions exclusively to Republicans. Those are the leaders of the special counsel investigation. To somehow call this a Democratic coup with Democratic stooges is just factually wrong.
That's call me.
That's what, right, the Republicans want you to believe. But if you just sort of think about it for a moment, it's just totally false. You've got 3 Republicans investigating the president. That's the leadership. And then anyone who understands the FBI understands the FBI is not a hotbed of liberalism, right?
Yes, it is.
They're generally somewhat conservative.
No.
If I had to guess, the overwhelming majority of them are likely going to be Republican. So that is what we have. And keep in mind, I think you might just want to look back at some of the articles about Robert Mueller. When Robert Mueller was first appointed, all of these Republicans said amazing, glowing things about him. And now many of the same Republicans are attacking him. Why?
He's corrupt. 2
guilty pleas, 2 indictments.
No.
That's really the only thing that's changed, right?
No.
Robert Mueller actually started to find criminality in the highest levels of the executive branch. And I think that's what's freaking out people on the other side of the aisle. So to me, that's the only thing I can tell that's any different, because if you think Robert Mueller was a great guy 6 months ago, why would you think any different of him now? Is it just because he got 2 guilty pleas and 2 indictments? That's what it looks like to me. Okay, what are your top 3 infrastructure projects for the South Bay? Yay, okay, local issue. All right. I think we should get the Green Line to come down through South Bay. I support light rail. When I was in the California State Legislature, I fought for, and at the time I worked with then Senator Jenny Oropeza, who was a real advocate for transportation funding. And we got essentially funding for the Green Line to connect and then go into LAX. And I thought at the time, maybe my grandchildren would see that happen. I'm very excited that everything is very accelerated now, partly because of the Olympics, partly because voters in LA County decided that transportation was a priority. So now we're going to get better access to LAX, and that's going to happen in just a few years. And I do want to see light rail come down through the South Bay. I also think that we should give money to individual cities, because I think individual cities are the best in determining how they want to fix their local streets. And I'm a big proponent of sort of taking money from up top and devolving it to individual cities and local jurisdictions. And then I do think we should think about automated driving. So it's going to come sooner rather than later. I'm also a recovering computer science major, by the way. So
I couldn't
when
tell.
I was in computer science in college, there were these folks that were working on what's called neural networks. And we thought, oh, they're sort of fringe, they're sort of pie in the sky, and it's never going to work. Because their whole theory was, oh, we're going to have computers think like humans. Well, no, it's not going to work. Well, about 8 years ago, it started working. And it's something called deep learning. And the way it works is you'll give the computer an immense amount of data. And then after a while, it just figures things out for itself. So for example, you'll feed a computer, 100,000 images of cats. And then after a while, it figures out what's a cat, what's a dog, what's an elephant, and so on. Same with voice recognition. You might remember how bad it was, a decade ago. But now, if you call any airline, whatever accent you use or terminology, it understands you. It's pretty remarkable. And it's because these systems, computer systems, are learning every time they get data. That's how automated driving is working. They're very relying on this deep learning, and it's accelerating at a very rapid pace. So we already have, in Las Vegas, there's actually an automated shuttle. It's quite slow, by the way, but it works. They made the very first beer delivery truck happen with automated delivery. And so certain cities are testing automated cars.
Jeez.
So it's going to happen. And as I was talking to someone who was going, the real question is, at what point in the future are they going to ban people from driving? So every year, about 38,000 people die from auto accidents. Most of it is human error. So automated cars would drastically cut down from that. There is, however, a problem of these cars being hacked. So I have introduced legislation with a Republican, Joe Wilson, out of South Carolina, and our legislation brings together stakeholders in the tech sector, the federal government, car manufacturers, and other stakeholders to say, look, you need to make sure cybersecurity keeps up with these advances in driverless cars, in driverless vehicles. So imagine, so for example, let's say someone hacks this phone, right? It's not moving. It's not going to kill me or you. But if someone hacks your car that's going 60 miles per hour down a freeway, and they decide to slam on the brakes, you're probably going to die, and you may, kill other people as well. Imagine if they were able to install a virus that said, on January 1st, 2028, all cars with this virus at 9 a.m. are going to accelerate to 150 miles per hour. That could kill a lot of people. So there are some pretty dramatic things that hackers and bad people and foreign powers could do. So we're trying to work on that part of it. So the third thing I would do with infrastructure is make sure we build up cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and whatever we're doing with automated vehicles. All right. How do we avoid the Trump administration's bloody nose preemptive strike on North Korea and the knee-jerk start of World War III? Right. So I touched on it in my remarks. I understand the administration's thinking in terms of the bloody nose. I don't think it's irrational. I get what they're trying to do. What they're thinking is, look, successive administrations, Republican and Democratic, have not been able to resolve the North Korea issue. Maybe we need to show some force. It's not an irrational line of thought. I just think the risks of that far outweigh any potential benefit, because there are, in my opinion, 25 bad responses to that, including North Korea going berserk, or North Korea launching artillery at Seoul, or launching nuclear weapons or chemical weapons, or Russia and China getting involved, versus the one potential benefit, which is North Korea goes, okay, we're scared, we're gonna listen to you, the United States of America. That might happen.
Yeah,
I just think
it's already happening.
It's just not likely. And
It's already happening.
you just have to look at, for example, Syria. We launched a bloody nose strike at Assad last year. He's still doing this thing. It's not like he's responding to the United States. He's still killing a lot of people. And I think, to me, a better way to think about North Korea is the following. On any given day, right, we can get annihilated. Russia could launch their nuclear missiles at us. China could launch an ICBM at Los Angeles. But they don't. Why is that? Because we deter them, right? We have a massive nuclear arsenal and we go, okay, you launch at us, we will destroy you. And that's kept the peace for decades and decades in terms of the nuclear area. So the question is, well, why couldn't we deter North Korea? I think we can. Our intelligence community, according to media reports, has assessed that a leader of North Korea is not suicidal, which means we don't believe he's actually trying to build an ICBM for the sole purpose of actually launching it at Minnesota, because he just feels like doing it. What our intelligence community believes when you read the articles is he's doing this as a means of self-preservation. His view is countries without nuclear weapons and the ability to strike the United States get taken out, the way that the United States took out Libya, took out Saddam Hussein, and so on. It's not an irrational view that he has. So if your assessment is the leader of North Korea is not suicidal, then there's really no reason you couldn't deter him the same way you deter China and Russia, Pakistan, other countries that do have nuclear weapons. So it depends on how you view it. But if you do believe he's suicidal, then you would attack him. And so that's where you are on North Korea. Okay. So some of this I just don't understand. I'm going to try my best. So it says, when are all the Democrats going to play? Oh, I get it. Okay, I thought it was handball politics. What it actually is, when are Democrats going to play hardball politics because the game has changed? Right. I think what I want to see, honestly, is I remember the president giving his joint address to Congress last year. I actually thought it was pretty good. I watched the State of the Union this year. I thought it was not bad. I want him to be like that for the next 10 months. And would it hurt Democrats' chance to take him out of the House? Yes. But as an American, I would feel much better. So that's what I want. I want the president to be normal.
What's that supposed to mean?
If he doesn't do that, then I just think it's my obligation to point that out and to not normalize what we can't normalize.
So what's the problem? You mean respecting our flag and respecting our military?
And so I just decided that if the president's going to say something that's false or misleading or take an action that's harmful to what I believe are U.S. interests or push policies that are harmful to Americans, I'm going to call that out. So I'll give you an example. Today, the president tweeted that essentially he had the most watched State of the Union in history. It's just a lie. And what by the way was just particularly funny to me is about an hour after he tweeted that, Fox News tweets out basically the State of the Union viewership in the last 20 or so years. And if you just look at that list, it's very clear that there were multiple States of the Union by other presidents that had far larger audiences. So it's probably one of the first times I've seen Fox News troll our president. That's what they did. But it just, so I point that out, and I point out that the president is lying. But why would I do that? Because
you're a loser.
He's lying so casually, right, about a really stupid thing.
You mean like Hillary?
Which then makes you wonder, well, what wouldn't he lie about if he's going to lie about this? If he's going to lie about something so objectively verifiable, then what are his limits of lying? And so, as long as the president keeps doing weird, stupid stuff like that, I think my obligation is to call that out. And in terms of sort of hardball politics, I think there's a way to express your viewpoint without being vulgar. I think the president uses quite often some vulgar statements that are sort of unbecoming of the grand office of the president. Every now and then, I will parrot that to sort of show how completely inappropriate it is to do that. And I have now come to the conclusion that satire and humor can point out things in a different way. I think humor can reveal truth in a way that other forms cannot. By the way, one of my favorite literary works was Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal. I thought it was actually quite effective when it came out. If you haven't read it, you should go read it. It's about eating children. It's not as bad as it sounds. So you should take a look at that. Okay. Do you feel you are prioritizing non-citizens over Americans?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that question.
Yes, you are.
I do not.
Yes, you are.
So let me take a line from the President's State of the Union, where you talk about the importance of faith.
You're rude.
And whenever he talks about that, I happen to be Christian. I happen to also have read the Bible, and I remember Matthew 25:35. Y'all will recognize this, where the Bible says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. So that's my view. And America has always been a welcoming country. Our iconic image is the Statue of Liberty. We welcome people from all over the world to come here and to seek the American dream. And one of the things that happens is because we have so many immigrants, it actually allows America to renew itself every generation. And it's that spirit of innovation, of renewal, that makes America not only great, but the preeminent country in the world. If you look at countries that don't have immigration, they tend to stagnate. And what ends up happening is because of our amazing diversity, we are able to continue to be ahead of other countries in a variety of different areas. If you look at, for example, Silicon Valley, it might actually be a majority, but many of the biggest names that you would know were started by immigrants. And you see those success stories happen all over the United States. So I'm a big advocate for immigrants, and I believe immigration actually helps America rather than holding us back. It's actually countries that don't have immigration that are held back. And then specifically in terms of dreamers and undocumented youth, there's overwhelming bipartisan support to say, look, if you were brought here as a kid and you had, right, your parents brought you here, it's not something of your own actions, then you should not be deported back to a country you've never seen. For all intents and purposes, these dreamers are Americans. They live in America, they went to school in America, all they've known is our great country. And if you do look at any poll, no one, except for the radical few, thinks it's in the best interest or morally right to deport them.
It is morally right.
So we're all trying to figure out a way to protect these dreamers. And there actually is a way right now. The DREAM Act would pass both houses.
Not would.
It's just that the president and Speaker Ryan Mitch McConnell don't want to do that. They sort of want to use dreamers as hostages to enact other things, whether it's a wall or restrictions on legal immigration.
Yes.
So we'll see where those negotiations go, and hopefully they'll just remain on the first two pillars of dreamers, border security. I think that can be done. Okay. If Dems take control of the House in 2018, what powers can be employed to address the emoluments clause? Right. So one of their silver linings of the Trump administration is a lot of people all of a sudden started reading the Constitution.
Have you?
They started being interested in civic life. So I'll give you an example. In my first term in Congress, I would do these telephone town halls.
And they suck.
We might get about 600 people to listen in. It'd be about an hour. I would talk about, what's happening and answer questions and so on. And then I did a telephone town hall in the first few months of the Trump administration. 6,000 people got out, right? A 10-fold increase. And then I did in-person town halls last year.
Those were fun.
And one of them, we had about 1,000 people. So you have this, and it wasn't just me. I mean, congressional districts all over America, you had
That was a lot of fun.
huge interest from citizens who came in and were interested. I mean, who would ever watch a congressional town hall to begin with in the past, right? And all of a sudden, 1,000 people were doing this. And then news outlets would live stream congressional town halls, and then people would watch that. And I think